Okay, everybody, wherever everybody is, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the fourth edition of ICUCH's webinar chain. Before I introduce Emad and we get the presentations underway, as many of you will be aware, the last few days has seen some very bad news cross our desks. The loss of George Bass, Patrice Palmer, and of course, somebody who is extremely dear to ICUCH, and that's Thijs Maleveld. Very sad days. I want to just share with you some of the comments about Thijs that we received on the announcement, just in terms of his characteristics. Some of you will be very familiar with the terms. He was a friend. He was a guide. We owe him, and I include myself in that, with the guidance he gave me during my thesis. A dynamic field archaeologist, scholar, made fabulous and meaningful contributions. And I think one thing that I would like to add myself, he was extremely generous with his time. Thijs always had time for everybody, whether they were a professor or one of his students. We all know his legacy, the students that have been taught and educated through Esberg, the course at Southern Denmark University, but many other things. Valued member of ICUCH, past president, contributor to the development of the 2001 UNESCO Convention, and many other things. And we could go on and on and on and talk about what Thijs did for our discipline. But also I'd like to share with you something else. And for some months now, Thijs has been involved and continued to work right up to the last moments, really, which again shows the strength of his personality. He was involved in a project, European project, and I can't go into detail because it's very sensitive, and the final report has not been made public. And Thijs made a commitment to keeping this under the radar until that was made public, which should be in a few days' time, related to the last days of the Second World War. Very important project and had a maritime component, and I guess we'll be reading about that very shortly. We also, ICUCH would like to tell its members and everybody that some of you may not be aware that ICUCH is about to publish a second Heritage at Risk volume, and we've included Thijs in the dedication of the book to him. As well as this morning, his widow should have received our contribution of respect, and we, of course, wish the family well. It's been a sad few days. And also, we would like to dedicate the two speakers today, the two presentations by Emad Khalil and Martijn Manders, to Thijs's memory. That said, I'd like to announce Emad, good friend, many years of talking with him since his time at Southampton University. And Emad, I'm absolutely fascinated by your project. I do not know anything about it, sad to say, but I'm bound to learn a lot about it in the next 25 minutes. So Emad, would you like to share your screen and tell us about the Marsa Bagoush project?
Thank you very much, Chris. And I certainly share with you sadness and about Thijs. And Thijs, who was actually the one who introduced me to ICUCH in 2006 when he was in Alexandria. And since then, I have been involved closely, working closely with Thijs, and he guided me during my years of the presidency. He was a sweet man beside everything else. So, yeah, God bless his soul. I'll be sharing my screen, and here it is. Share screen. Can you see it now? Is it proper? Can you see it, Chris?
It's perfect.
Okay,
yes, perfect.
Okay, perfect. The word Marsa actually means harbor in Arabic. The word Marsa anything is a harbor. Marsa Bagoush, Marsa Reka, Marsa Murakham, all these Marsas are harbors. So when we speak about Marsa Bagoush, it's the harbor of the site of Bagoush. on the northwest coast of the project is carried out by the University of Alexandria, by the Center of Maritime Archaeology, and it's funded by the Honor Trust Foundation since 2015. So for the past 6 years, we have been generously funded by the foundation, and I hope this will continue, inshallah. The site is actually owned by the university. This is quite exceptional because the land of the site of Marsa Bagoush is a property of Alexandria University since 1968. And since that time, every year there's a summer camp that takes place in this site during the months of summer, like maybe 3 months every year, where every week a group of students and staff members would be going to stay in the tents for 5 days, just having some nice time, fishing, swimming, and so on. Of course, the odd group is my group, because we only go diving. This is the only group in the university who actually go diving. So I have been going to Marsa Bagoush since I was a child, actually, with my father, because he was also a professor at the university. So I know the site very well, but I have never noticed any archaeology, maybe because I was not looking. In 2010, we were at the camp with the students, and we were snorkeling and just, having a nice time. And then we came across sherds of pottery. Here is the bay, or the Marsa, as it is, and this is where we. Just let me get the pointer. Yes, this is where we found the sherds of pottery. Obviously, it was amphora, very clear, broken amphora, and from the first view, we can realize that it is early Roman amphora. This was in 2010, 11 years ago. The process of obtaining a permission and securing the funding and so on, it took us some time, and we did not start actually working on the site until later on. But from the first views while snorkeling, we can realize that the site is quite shallow, visibility is very good, and the amphora sherds are extending for tens of meters every direction. They are not concentrated in one single spot, but they are more like a number of clusters or a number of concentrations of amphora spreading in different places around the Marsa or around the bay. Mostly of the same date. At that time, we did not realize any differences because we didn't examine anything closely. It was just from snorkeling. This is where Marsa Bagoush is. It is about the middle way between Alexandria and the Libyan border, almost halfway, 250 kilometers from each, east of Alexandria, west of Alexandria, and east of the Libyan border. And it is one of several marsas or several natural bays or embayments along the north coast of Egypt. However, most of them, unfortunately, have been reclaimed or built over by resorts and hotels and stuff like this. It's a common problem in the Mediterranean, and it is obviously taking place in Egypt. So many of these marsas or these bays do not exist anymore. They are just built over and they are unreachable. Probably the only thing that saved Bagoush is the fact that it's owned by the university, so no one is building on it. So this is where it is, and we started digging into archives and looking into documents and trying to figure out what these pottery lots are doing there. So the most significant reference in this case is the 3rd century AD guide known as the Stadiamus Maris Magni. It's a sailing guide, basically, like the Periplus Maris Erythraei for the Red Sea, for example. This is the Stadiamus Maris Magni, or the distances of the Great Sea, the Maris Magni, from the 3rd century AD. And what this document have is a list of all possible harbors and anchorages along the north coast of Africa. As we were looking into research, we came across this statement where the document says that from Leuke-Acte to Zigris, there is a distance of 90 stadias. Leuke-Acte is a known site. It's known, it's a verified site. It's this headland. Currently, it's known as Ras al-Hikmah. Ras is head in Arabic. So it's the headland of wisdom. Hikmah is wisdom. So it's the headland of wisdom. From this site to a place called Zigris, 90 stadias, or about 17 kilometers. And in this site of Zigris, there is an islet, and the guide is advising sailors and ships to put into the place with the islet, on your left, there is water in the sand. So this is the main statement, actually, or the main evidence, textual evidence we came across concerning the site of Zigris or Marsa Bagoush. This distance between Leukeacte and Bagoush is almost exactly 17 kilometers. I mean, I've measured it in several ways, and it's almost exactly 17, 18 kilometers. So it's very accurate, actually. Again, this map was drawn based on the Stadiamus Maris Magni. Here's Alexandria, and here is Zigris, and almost approaching to the Libyan borders. So it's verified that it is one of the sites mentioned in the Stadiamus Maris. Looking at the Bay of Bagoush, it's very much confirming what the documents say. There is an islet, here it is, and probably in antiquity it was completely separated from the coast, because this is all sand and it keeps moving with different weather conditions. So it was an islet, and he's advising the boats to put in with this island on the left-hand side, which is the only way to get into the harbor. So it's very much proving what the document is saying. So we were almost certain that this is the site of Zigris mentioned in the Stadiamus Maris. Looking more into evidence, we realized that this site was actually surveyed in the 19th century by the British Navy. It was a project carried out by the Navy at that time to survey a lot of sites in North Africa, and including this site of Marsa Bagoush, and it's written in different pronunciations. It's written back with a double Q, and this is the same time, the same scale, the same everything, the same headland, and it is a confirmation that this is what we are looking at. So the project started in 2015, and the objective of the project was to conduct a systematic survey of the site and try to understand what this is, and to try to develop some 3D models of the remains, used basically for education purposes and to show the students back at the university, and try to develop some sort of a management plan for the site, because no one knew about the site at all except us. Starting the research, we realized that these clusters or these concentrations of amphora are ending. They are spread all over the northern border of this bay in different locations. And it is evidence of not just one shipwreck, but at least 2 or maybe 3, as I'm going to mention in a minute. These specific type of amphora are very easy to recognize in Egypt, because these are Egyptian amphora, typically made in the Alexandria region. And it was believed until very recently that these were made specifically for local consumption and not for export. This is the type of amphora that existed there, very much the same. These are known as Egyptian amphora type 3, and it is a typology specifically to Egyptian ceramics, or Roman ceramics, or Roman amphora. And as I mentioned, it was produced in Egypt, and mostly it was used for local consumption and not for export. At least this is what we thought. This is the type, amphora Egyptian type 12, 1st century BC to the 2nd century AD. And in fact, the area just around Alexandria, to the west of Alexandria, has a lot of evidence for producing this specific type of amphora. Different types of amphora kilns and wasters for making this type of amphora exist around Alexandria. And this is just one of the wasters along the north coast of the Mariut Lake, just west of Alexandria. Here's Alexandria. And all these little dots here are amphora production sites. Not just of this type, but of other Egyptian types as well, as I'm going to mention. So this is one of them, and there are few more Roman Egyptian amphora that were produced in this place. So the same amphoras, almost certainly the same clay, were found in Marsa Bagoush. So this is an evidence of a ship that actually departing or leaving from Alexandria, heading along the northwest coast of Africa. So this Egyptian origin. Yeah. However, the site also included other amphiras from other types and other dates, other origins. So we are not looking at one type or one shipwreck, but we are looking at a number of ships, starting from the Hellenistic period, the 2nd century BC, all the way until the late Roman period. So we have this late Roman pottery from Gaza. We have Dressel I from Italy. We have Cohen amphora from Kos, Cambodian amphoras, North African amphora. So we are looking at a busy site with a lot of activities going on. We have raised some samples for dating and for typology to just document them, and we managed to put them back in the water to keep them there. We haven't raised anything back to Alexandria except some specific pieces, as I mentioned later. But generally, it was just raised, dated, photographed, and placed back on the water. This is the earliest amphora we have. It's the amphora from Knidos from the 2nd century BC, and you can see it's almost direct line from Knidos to Zigris to Bagoush, which I thought was very interesting. If the boat was directly from Knidos to Zigris, it would just have sailed in one line and get there. It has a stamp of xenon type. It's a very famous type of Canadian amphora with a stamp of the letter ZEN. In addition to amphora, we start coming across more evidence for shipwrecks like roof tiles. In fact, although I have been in this field for so many years, but I have never seen roof tiles ever in any place else. This is the only site I have seen roof tiles underwater, and we have a lot of them actually. Several pieces of roof tiles were located there, in addition to frames from ships, obviously with some mortise and tenon fastening clear there. And it was very surprising in the same bay to find another cluster of completely different type of pottery, which has nothing to do with the Roman period or the Hellenistic period. It's very typical Islamic or late medieval pottery, including this imitation of porcelain, not porcelain. Different types of amphora. So this is completely this was confirmed when we came across those two grapnel anchors, which are probably from the same day previously mentioned ceramics. They both date back probably to the late medieval period. So those two grapnel anchors probably belong to the same ship. We ended actually marking all the clusters of amphora, of anchors, roof tiles, and wooden planks. And this was the end result. We have a very small bay, which is only 900 meters in length from east to west. Quite small, but it's full of remains. And it seems that ships, as they were entering the bay, maybe during bad weather, or maybe ships did not know where to come from, but they have those stocks. The bay actually is surrounded from the north with a number of these reefs, just under the water level, just under the sea level. So it might not be easy to recognize until you are very close to it. So probably this is how those ships ended wrecking this site. So far, we have a confirmation that this is Marsa Bagoush. This is actually Zigris. We have a confirmation of the dates that we came across, but that left the statement that was mentioned in the Sadianos Maris Magni about water in the sand, which was quite weird in a sense. I mean, how can water be in the sand? But we thought, well, we have seen water, and so let's start looking in the sand. So we went actually surveying around the bay, and we actually utilized the knowledge and resources of the locals there. This is inhabited by Bedouins, by locals. So we start asking them about any idea about what water in the sand meant. And I think it took us like 5 minutes after asking them that they said, well, yeah, we know what this is. Let's follow us. And they took us to this system. This is a huge, big system. They have installed a pump, a water pump, to drain water out of this system, which still have water until now. Just next to this cistern, we came across another system, and a third one, and a fourth one, and more cisterns. And all of them, they still have water in them, and this is water in the sand. So we start actually getting into the system and trying to document it. And we realized that it still have water, as you can see. These are the pipes that the locals have installed to draw water out of the cisterns used for irrigation. And the cisterns keep extending for hundreds of meters underground, beautifully, very nice. Even the mark tools are still there. This is probably Roman, and they just keep extending, going on and on and on, and they're interconnected. So we have this network of underground cisterns with water in it, just few meters away. And this water comes from the mountains, from the groundwater, just seepage of groundwater traveling through the rocks, filtrating. So it's very nice, very clean water. And this is going on and on and on and on. So we managed to document some of them, and you can see the distances between each opening is quite short distance, 14 meters. And the system exists at 4 meters below the ground level. So we have registered or documented fortunes just very close from the shoreline. So more digging, actually, we realized that information, we realized that this site actually was used during World War II. And it was very known, very well known. The internet is full of information about the site of Bagoush. The problem is that Bagoush is written in English in very different ways. Sometimes with a G, sometimes with a Q, sometimes with double Qs, sometimes with double Gs. And it's so, you have to look into all this to extract the information. This is probably why I didn't find anything useful at the beginning. But when I start changing the spelling of the word, we came across a ton of information about the squadron, the Royal Air Force squadron that was based there, even the names of people that were stationed there during World War II. And it seems that the main reason this site was so busy is because of fresh water, because of the existence of groundwater, fresh water in the middle of the desert. So this was the main reason for attracting the Royal Air Force camps to be there. Still, until today, the installments and the foundations of the camps, the British camps, still exist until now. This is a photograph from the World War II, and this is the actual site that took photo of a couple of ago. And you can still see everything. It's still very much the same. So it was really very interesting so far. The Stadiamus Mars Magni was telling the truth. Until now, let's push it a little bit further and see what the document says about other harbors. So the document says that Adamantia, another bay, is only 3 kilometers, 3.5 kilometers. So this is very close by. And in this Ladamantia, this harbor, there is an island, a larger island. And the document is advising sailors to put into it with the island on your right-hand side this time, not the left-hand side like the previous time. And there is a harbor accessible with any wind. So 3.5 kilometers is very close. So actually we went looking for Ladamantia, 3.5 kilometers away from Zigris. And yeah, it's clear, it's there. Here is Zigris, here is Bagoush. And here is Ladamantia, which is also Bagoush. This entire area is called Marsa Bagoush. This whole area in Arabic noun is known as Marsa Bagoush. But this bay is quite larger, and there is an island. And getting into the bay, the island have to be on the right-hand side. So this is confirming the information from someone looking in this bay. And we start finding for the first time intact amphora, because the bay is a bit deeper. In the first harbor, the depth is never greater than 5 or 6 meters. In this one, it goes up to 18 meters. So it's much deeper, and you can see intact amphora.
Emad, we cannot hear your voice.
Yeah, I was muted by the system for some reason. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. But it
Okay,
will be very nice if you repeat the last 2 minutes.
Okay. Okay. So far, this is the other side that we have been looking at, La Damantia, just very close to the original side. And we came across a lot of intact amphora this time, because the site is deeper, about 18 meters average depth. So we find a lot of North African amphora from Tunisia, Africa coming from Italy, from North Africa, from Palestine, from the Palestinian coast. So it's a variety of amphora, obviously not from the same date. Those 4 were excavated based on the request of the museum in Alexandria. They are developing a display for amphora, and they asked us to raise those 5. So we did this last summer. Dating the pottery that was found in Bagoush, we realized it's coming from basically everywhere. It's a very busy harbor, although it's remote. It's 250 kilometers away from Alexandria, but it's very busy. Different shipwrecks of different parts, of different dates, from different origins have been, wrecked there for some reason, one reason or another. Then we started coming across a lot of anchors. Stone anchors, lead stock anchors, Roman lead stock anchors. We have, I think, 3 or 4 of them. And then Roman anchors, Roman iron anchors. And actually, I have not seen this concentration of anchors at the same place anywhere else except in the harbor of Alexandria. But anywhere else in Egypt, I haven't come across this big number of anchors just in a small area. So we have Roman anchors, more Roman anchors, more anchors, and more anchors and more anchors. And wherever you go, there are anchors of different types, different sizes, and different dates, all the way until 19th century Admiralty anchors. So again, this is an evidence of how busy this site might have been during the past 2,000 years. This is just a simple map we developed for the anchors. We have a concentration so far of 32 of them. And 32 anchors in one side. This is the largest number recorded in Egypt outside Alexandria. So I think this is very interesting. The latest or the most recent find we came across was this inscription, I guess. In this island there, the island that was mentioned in Sadiamus Maris Magni, one of my colleagues actually was just swimming across and then walking on this island when he came across this inscription. Someone just wrote some English letters on the rocks, engraving them on the rocks. And he took a photo, and we went back and looked at it. And it looked, very weird. I mean, it's written in English, not in Arabic. So why would someone write, letters in English on this island? Well, I tried to solve this out, and looking at the letters carefully, the spelling came as you can see, HMS Palmbourne. And I had no clue what HMS Palmbourne is. HMS is a ship, obviously, but on board. So I start looking, trying to figure out what the hell is HMS Palmbourne doing there in Marsa in Egypt. And when I came across this map, and this map was developed in 1939 based on a survey carried out in Marsa by HMS Palmbourne. Apparently, this is a Royal Navy ship that was carrying one of the surveys along the north coast of Africa, and it came to the site and it did this bathymetric survey of Marsa, and it was published in this map. And actually, I mean, I was very happy to find out what HMS Palmbourne was. But again, the bathymetric survey was very useful because we digitized the survey and we managed to put it on the actual satellite image, and it was very accurate sitting there. So all of a sudden, we have a bathymetric survey of the site that we are surveying from a document that was produced in 1939. So I'm very grateful for the Royal Navy for doing this, actually. So this is what we have done so far, looking at those two sites, the first one and the second one, but the distance between them are still not looked at. So we have this entire area to survey during the coming years. We have no idea what exists here. We just looked at this embayment and that embayment. So we are planning, starting from next summer, inshallah, maybe June or so, to go and try to cover these areas. And hopefully we might be using some science scan sonar this time to try to cover a larger distance. So this is the next step, and hopefully, so far we got funding from the HFF, so we are very grateful for them for the coming 3 years. So this is very good news to me personally. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Emad. It was, as usual, very nice presentation. And from the first second until the last one, I watched carefully what you told and what you show as archaeological remains to us. And as you know, we are working at the Turkish coast of Mediterranean, and our remains are exactly very similar or same.
Yeah, I'm sure.
From the Bronze Age until the last century, we see all kind of your remains in this part of Mediterranean, and it is very nice. Dear colleagues, we are working with Emad not only in ICOMOS, also we work together at the founding of UNESCO Unity in Underwater Archaeology Network, and we are also working at CIMAS Scientific Committee together. And working with Emad is honor and pleasure. And thank you very much again for this very nice presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, it was Hakan Aniz, one of the moderator of this webinar program. And now, I would like to invite Chris to call to Martijn Manders.
Martijn, are you listening and are you good to go? Martijn is going to speak about in situ preservation, which, just to remind a few people, is that ICUCH recently responded to an invitation from UNESCO, the 2001 Secretariat, to help clarify what is perceived as a misunderstanding about the terminology relating to in situ preservation. I'm sure Martijn will make it much clearer for everybody. Thanks, Martijn. When you're ready.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Good. Then I hope that everybody else can hear me too. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can. There's just a bit of background noise coming from somewhere.
That might be my computer. It's not the most modern one. So I think this is just what we need, or what we have. So I hope that I am clear enough for people to hear me. Just say so if.
No, we hear you loud and clear.
Okay, good. Then just think about planes, airplanes. If I if I see Emad's presentation, then I want to go into the field again. We are not allowed to do that at the moment. So I saw all these nice pictures, and now we're getting mostly pictures from the North Sea and the Wadden Sea, which is less clear. But indeed, today I want to talk about the in situ preservation of sites as part of the underwater cultural heritage management. And I see that's already 1740, so I will pass the 1800 hours. I'm sorry for that. As we all know, in situ preservation is an important part of the Treaty of Valletta or Malta from 1992 in Europe, but also, of course, the ICOMOS Charter in 1996 and the UNESCO Convention 2001. But then immediately the question rises, what is in situ preservation? Most of you have been working with the terminology, but still there was some unclarity about this. But also, what is in situ preservation and what do we mean with that? If we have, as UNESCO said, 3 million shipwrecks, or if I go to the Netherlands, if we have 60,000 sites on the seabed. What does in situ preservation mean then? And I will just start to explain this to you, because is in situ preservation maybe this magic pill that we always thought that it would be? And it was so popular at a certain stage, and that's quite a few years ago, that it became a real important part. And that was the moment that all these international treaties were developed, because everybody saw something positive in situ preservation. Archaeologists wanted to preserve their sites, but there was also a lot of work connected to it. Politicians thought that it was a great way of not paying too much for in situ for shipwrecks, because excavation was very expensive, and so on. There were all sorts of groups of stakeholders that thought that in situ preservation may be this magic pill, this panacea. But the question is this in situ preservation, is this that preferred option as I more or less sketch, or is it just a tool, or is it a tool of for management and an option in a series of other options? Or in other words, is this fundamental radical approach saying that we need to preserve for future generations? Or can we look at it a little bit more pragmatically? So that's part of the talk that I'm having now. But I first want to go to the technicalities, to the management of underwater cultural heritage, in which in situ preservation is part. So if we look at the process from desk-based research to prospection to archaeological significance, and please look at the right side, you see deselection. I get back to that as well. But you see a kind of a linear way of in situ preservation, and in a way that is more or less what we've always been thinking about in situ preservation. We preserve the sites in situ, and then, the monitoring, maybe we do that, but at least we will not go back to our resources after we've done in situ preservation. But it could be a little bit more, a little bit less linear, with also going back to in situ preserved sites and start some excavations. So there's a different view, and there's a different skill. You can be more the radical, but also, and very important, you can have a view from site by site, looking at wrecks and decide if we have to preserve them in situ or not, if we think they're important enough to preserve in situ or not. Or we can look at it from a more narrative kind of a way, more from a larger scale. Let's say the bay that Emad was looking at, it has stories, and maybe you're not preserving only one side, but you would preserve it in its context with the other sides, and you take decisions what to preserve or not. So you can skill, it is very important in the management. I'll get back to those things. If we look at it from a little bit larger scale, then you see, then you can do some inventories on the known sources. As I said, in the Netherlands, we have about 60,000 locations, and we can put them all next to each other and start to pick out the ones that we really want to preserve in a narrative kind of a way, because that's how we look at it. But then we still miss something. And what we miss is those ones that we each year discover again, and especially the ones that we don't discover. Because there is a lot of resources that we haven't found up until now. But those resources we can predict. So we can predict our resources and put them into account when we start our management process of in situ. So we can preserve sites in situ even if we haven't found them. And that's when we start to look at the site instead of only the individual objects or the individual shipwrecks. And by doing that, we also know more about the development of the area, the evolution of the area, and therefore also the story of the area, the narrative of the area. And that's connected to the different sites. So if we have assessed those sites and even assessed the area with all the locations that can be of great value to find objects or are maybe less important for finding sites, then there is actually a few options left. First of all, deselection. Well, who is talking about deselection of site? Deselection of site is very important. I'll come back to that in the later stage, in the last few slides of my presentation. But we also have in situ preservation, as I said, and of course excavation. But in situ preservation and excavation mean also more work. In situ preservation, the monitoring after monitoring, how far do we go? And excavation, we also have the lifting, the conservation and deposition. But we have to document and we have to do the interpretation of all the information as well. So it doesn't stop after we decided that we have to preserve a site in situ. So in situ preservation is a choice in cultural heritage management. And it is a choice, but it's not an activity on its own. So why do we preserve in situ? Why do we want to do that? That's one of the first questions that we ask ourselves, because it's not a process by its own. It is because we want to do something. Well, first of all, it is threatened at a large scale. We all know that. But also we can preserve sites for next generations. So we preserve the objects that we think are important for next generations. What they think is their choice. But also we've developed law to do so. So why not use that law to protect, of course. There are many known sites. I just said 3 million. Who knows how many there are in the world, but 60,000 in the Netherlands at least. And then we have, of course, the unknown sites. In situ preservation can be cost effective, but I already showed you that there's still a lot of costs concerned with it. And there is often a considerable time period between discovery and further action. So if you find the site, it doesn't mean that you immediately can excavate. So in between, you have to do in situ preservation as well. And of course, there is also a lack of knowledge and conservation of specific types of sites, like, for example, large iron ships. If we bring them up, we will have a big problem. So the threats, let me just go very quickly through them. Of course, we have those mechanical and those biological processes to Valis, for example, or the chemical processes, but I want to focus on the anthropogenic processes. Just a quick look, because although natural erosion is of huge influence, especially with the climate change, what we do as people on the seabed is enormous, from the fishery to the souvenir hunting. But for example, think of, if we look at the North Sea, between England and the Netherlands and Belgium, and Norway, it's not a very large sea, but there are already 60,000 projects for building wind farms. So it is an enormous activity going on the seabed. So the threats are big. Yeah, look at what the North Sea looks like. It's pipelines, it's dredging, it's those oil platforms, it's the wind farms. So the disturbance is huge. So there's so many threats and there's so many sites to protect. We have to know what we want to protect or what we need to protect. So that goes through assessments, it goes through selections, and it goes through prioritizing. And we have to develop tools to do all these things. And we need to make choices. That is very important. We have to prioritize our cultural significance. We have to look at the possibilities to protect. If we can't protect, then there is two joint chances left. One is deselecting, the other one is excavating. We have to look at the resources, what do we have? And we have to look at the responsibilities. But if we want to make choices, we need to have knowledge. And this knowledge has to be on the intrinsic value and, of course, also on the conditions of the environment in the site. And without this, in situ preservation is not possible or is a farce. Intrinsic value, because we need to know which site we value more and which site we value less. So without that, no in situ protection. But also the changes in the environment. Look at the right side, erosion, sedimentation process around shipwreck BZN11. If the conditions change, we might not be even able to preserve the site. So without knowledge about the environment, no in situ preservation is possible, or at least, again, it is a farce. So, and that same is about the management of the environment, because the whole environment may be shifting. Look at here, this is part of the Bodensee, which has a lot of processes going on. If we don't know about that, then again, in situ preservation is a farce. So it is not just the easy way in situ preservation. There's a lot of things that we have to keep in mind. In situ preservation is actually managing changes. So, in situ preservation, managing changes and mitigating against threats to avoid the loss of information and to avoid the loss of the value of the sites. How do we do that? How do we preserve? How do we protect? We can do that passively, of course, with the law and the policy, but also actively by preserving the sites physically in situ. And below, I will be very short in this. Below you see the MOS projects from the early 2000s, MACHU, REC Protect, and SASMAP. Look them up on the internet. Those are large European projects where we did all sorts of testing on how we can physically protect shipwrecks, from sandbags to barriers, polypropylene nets to cover up sites, and the artificial seagrass as well. And all these things are known and have been investigated in length. So check those things out. We can preserve sites in situ, but only if we know how the environment behaves. Without that, it's not possible. So what do? We preserve the sites in situ, and we start to monitor the sites. Here you see a site that we have been monitoring since since the end of the 90s. And we still do this every year. So our commitment to preserve the site has been ongoing because we thought it was important to preserve, so we keep on preserving it. And that costs a lot of money. So I'll just quickly go through this. But there is one big problem about in situ preservation. As underwater archaeology is, or archaeological sites underwater are, underwater means often out of sight and therefore out of mind. But just think about one of the most important stakeholders that we have, sports divers. They find a shipwreck, and what do we do as archaeologists? We say, this is a very important site, let's cover it up. So what does it do with the public support or the support of the divers? This is quite difficult. So you can make an artificial reef, but it may be quite difficult. So if we do in situ preservation, we have to think of one other thing. Why are we preserving it in situ? What is the value and how do people value it? It may be important because of the enjoyment. It may be important for commemoration, or the site may be important for science. And if we know why the site is so important, then we can also take measures to do the right thing. If a site is very important for enjoyment, of course you will not cover it up completely. Therefore we have to know why we preserve the sites in situ. So why preservation and protection? We preserve for the future. So we transfer the sites to next generations because we think that is important. What they do, they can decide later on. It's also a storage for later research for ourselves, an archive we can preserve for enjoyment, but of course also because shipwrecks are good for the biodiversity and the hard substrate, and we can cooperate between ourselves. And of course commemoration, like for example World War II wrecks, which are war graves. So experience and enjoyment may be what other people are looking for, and we have to keep that in mind as archaeologists. So there may be a friction between a nice anchor, as we've just seen with Emad as well, a nice anchor underwater for sports divers, and if we start to cover it up with artificial seagrass, for example, or maybe even people want to bring things up and we want to keep it underwater. That's what we have to keep in mind. In situ preservation has that kind of an issue, but also the issue of long-term commitment and the costs of it. So that's what it is practically. And in situ is, of course, as we said before, is first option to consider. And therefore, we have set a few laws and treaties in order. And as we look, when we look at that, we just said Treaty of Valletta, ICOMOS Charter, UNESCO Convention, then we see that actively we are preserving almost all sites underwater in situ. There's hardly any wreck that we really excavate. There's only a few of them in the let's say 3 million ones. So most of them we preserve in situ. Or do we? That's a big question actually, because in situ preservation means obligations, means actions. If we don't do that, it is a farce. We just lose the sites and we don't even gain information of them. So keep that in mind. If we talk about policy and law, then we know, of course, law enforcement is very difficult. And I'm not only talking about the Netherlands, I talk about many countries. Management of underwater cultural heritage has no high priority for a lot of countries, and especially in relation with economic growth. Illegal excavation is difficult to prove, at least in the Netherlands. You have to see somebody steal something from the seabed. Well, how can you do that? And an interesting thing in the Netherlands, which is often also in other countries or in many other countries as well, the heritage management has been decentralized in the last couple of years, and therefore the responsibility is not only central, but it's also for municipalities. And what do they know, and what kind of opportunities do they have to have law enforcement? But there is another side of the coin. So decentralization is, of course, not always good for the central governments to keep an eye on it, but it means that there's more access to the heritage for other stakeholders. And therefore, this participation is in line with the European Faro Convention, and the retreat of the central authorities makes a stronger coherence of local skill on a local scale, and reinforce the process of people getting more and more involved. And people getting more and more involved is stronger awareness raising. It may be the biggest and strongest thing for in situ protection. So the budgets, there's also another side of the coin. As I said, the budgets are small. The social coherence on local level may also be difficult because the local authorities and the offenders are often very close together, and the natural threat doesn't pay any bills, so nobody's paying attention to that. So another thing in Europe is that the archaeological heritage management leans heavily on the Treaty of Valletta, and the responsibilities on the short terms are for the disturbers. So the disturbers, if they disturb something, they have to do the first things on the. They have to pay the first. They have to pay the first things in management, but then afterwards they can just leave the scene, and then there is nobody who's taking care of the underwater cultural heritage anymore. So the result is that most sites, or many sites, are just left on the seabed. And but there is a good thing. More people are involved. There are stronger laws, and but there is no structural money for in situ preservation and monitoring. And there's a conflict, lots of conflicts of interest in situ sites, which makes management of it much more difficult. And another big problem is that even though sites are protected, we have to keep in mind that sites are degraded. So are we stuck between the rock and a hard place? Can we preserve sites in situ and still enjoy, have economic gain, obtain knowledge? It is very important to discuss this. It is very important to keep this into the open and start discussing with other stakeholders about the management. So the management has to be far more inclusive if we want to do in situ preservation, and use this in situ preservation as one of those tools. So it is balancing between the different needs, making choices, do stakeholder analysis. So look at who has to be involved, see heritage as one of the issues in the larger area, and raise awareness and get more people involved. I think I will leave it here. There is much more to say about it, and I hope this is a trigger for more discussions on cultural heritage management, and especially in situ as part of this whole management process, because I think we need to start discussing about it again. Look who has the responsibilities. It's not only the archaeologists, but it's but we have to look at the role that we are playing, because of the fact that there's more stakeholders involved. The role for the archaeologists is also changing. We have to be more mitigating. We have to be guiding the people in making the choices, because we will not be the only ones who make the choices which sites are going to be preserved. Others have to be involved as well. This was my talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martijn. Just a few words to say, really. I hope everybody found that not just super clear, but stimulating in terms of how we should be considering in situ preservation. And Martijn made it absolutely clear that there has been some change. And I'd just like to leave us with a few key words from and statements from Martijn's excellent presentation. The first one that I underlined was in situ preservation was seen as a magic pill, a panacea. Perhaps we all know what that's about in terms of some interpretation of no action. And I think Martijn made it very clear that if in situ preservation is the option that is chosen, and it's not the only option, then it's not just about leaving sites in situ, it's about management and actions and consequences. And that is a super important concept to take away. The other concept that Martijn, I felt was very strongly made was the process about managing change, because as he made absolutely clear, just leaving it there is not about management, it's just about leaving. So again, that implies actions, resources, consequences, but also future options. Something that, for those of us who have been involved in raising awareness among stakeholders, and Martijn made the issue about stakeholder analysis, I'm reading this on his last slide, this is absolutely crucial, is knowing who else has an interest in what happens to a site moving forward. Very, very, super important. And out of sight, out of mind is one of the big challenges we still face, not just to sites generally, but those we actually choose to place in situ. How many times have some of us had the conversation with the important stakeholder, the finder, typically the commercial diver or fisherman, saying, well, this is so important, we're going to cover it up and nobody's going to see it for 25, 30 years or whenever the next decision is made. And sometimes they look at you as though you're sort of stupid. Why aren't we digging it up? And I think it's one of our key messages is that we can't be excavating everything. And we have an obligation to choose, to decide which is significant and which, and be brave enough, and I've read enough of Martijn's stuff to know that deselection is one of those horrible decisions, but you may not have another choice through all sorts of reasons. But that public engagement is super important. We are working, I think, in partnership with society, and society takes on multiple forms in this context. An important next context was, I thought, law enforcement. As archaeologists, we can only persuade, and law enforcement can actually enforce and do something about it. But convincing law enforcement sometimes to devote precious resources onto something that may be buried is quite a difficult ask, I think. But I think it's a challenge that we must face. And I really like the last comment, really, that I'm going to leave you with. Are we caught between a rock and a hard place? Because I think the whole essence of the presentation is about stimulating debate, stimulating what we mean by in situ preservation, what we mean by managing change. These are all things that I think as we go forward into the next 10 years with climate change and the decade of ocean science, we're going to be facing these decisions more increasingly, I suspect. And hopefully that, you, the listener, will have found, the outline of in situ preservation, if not crystal clear, will have stimulated some thought lines. Thanks very much.
Can I add something, Chris?
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah.
Well, I did cut my presentation a bit short, but what I find, I said in the beginning, I will say something about deselection. I didn't mention it because I didn't show the last slide, but what is important, if we think about deselection and why it is so important, it's not only to make the burden for ourselves less, it is also an opportunity for us to engage with other stakeholders. If we deselect, with deselection, we can state to others that we find it less important, or we have chosen other sites to prioritize, but it leaves the possibilities open for other people to be engaged, like avocational divers. They can do their research and we can help them do their research, but they do it on that instead of those few sites that we find very important to keep. So deselection is an enormous important part to take away a lot of burden, but also to state very clearly, this is what we find important, this is what we find less important, or this is what for our reasons or means we find not highly valued, but it can be valued for you, and we can you can work on that side if you want.
Yeah, thanks, Martijn. I think those are absolutely valid points too. I just like to throw another penny in the pond, is that what we consider important is not necessarily what the future is going to consider important. And we suffer that challenge too. And that's why I think consideration, stakeholder engagement, all of the things that Martijn illustrated so clearly we have to take into consideration and give the best possible thinking to it. We don't have all the answers because we can't look into the future, but we have to do the best we can. Thanks, Martijn. Crystal clear. Hopefully everybody else thought it was stimulating too. Thanks.
Yes, now we came end of the fourth e-commerce iCouch webinar. And we would like to thank Martijn, Emad, and of course Chris as the first moderator. And we wish to see you all next month, the fifth webinar of e-commerce iCouch. Thank you very much and have a good day. Goodbye.
Thanks, Hakan, and we'll see you next week. No, not next week, next month.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody. Thank you.
Goodbye.